Okay, so we have some time still yet, don't we? I mean, it's not quite 4. It's 3:59. Okay, well, I guess we're good to go. You want me to wait?
You're recording.
Okay.
You can say. Shout-outs?
I will be doing shout-outs. So, hi everybody. Welcome to my talk. Hope you're enjoying Notacon. My presentation is on IRS, identity theft, and you, or someone pretending to be you. I am speaking today under the guise of 123-45-6789. If that's too much of a mouthful, you can call me John Q. Public. I don't have that as my actual SSN, but that is a combination of my luggage. I don't work in InfoSec professionally. I work in IT, but I do have some InfoSec background. I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not an accountant. I am a victim of identity theft, so we'll be talking about an incident that happened to me just a couple weeks ago. But before we get into that, I want to give a little bit of recognition to Froggy and Tiger, all the Notacon staff, everybody who's ever presented at Notacon, all the people who've attended over the years. As many of you may have heard, this may be the last Notacon. Attendance has been sharply down over previous years, and the financials aren't working out. So that's kind of a sad thing. I wanted to take some time and just talk about how much this has meant to me over the years that I've been coming. 11 years is a great run, and not everything can last forever. This might be the last Notacon unless some miracle happens with money, but nature abhors a vacuum, so don't let the future suck. I have full faith that there will be something else that happens in time. Cleveland's too big of a town not to have something like this. It's just a matter of the next generation needs to pick up the torch. So I want to talk about a guy named Aesthetics for just a minute. Aesthetics has spoken at Notacon on several occasions. He's not here this year. He brought me to Notacon 6. And until he did that, I was pretty isolated in the tech community. I had been working in IT for close to 8-10 years at that point, and didn't have very many social things to get with people who were in my clan. So he was speaking at Notacon 6, needed a ride from the airport, and I happened to be local, so I offered to pick him up. He got me in for free, and the rest is history. This is Neon Rain. She was also at Notacon 6, and I met her there. She was giving a talk on neurohacking, and she was very friendly and welcoming, more than pretty much anyone else who was there. After the con, we connected through email and talked, and she gave me encouragement to come up with a talk of my own for the next Notacon. And at the time, it wasn't even on my radar. It was the first thing I had a thought about. But she kept pushing me to do it. She said, everybody has something that they can talk about, and you don't have to be top of your field. You don't have to be an expert. You just have to have the willingness and the interest to do it. So I told her that I would do that. I submitted a talk for Notacon 7, was waitlisted, didn't speak it until Notacon 8. But by that time, I had gotten enough forward momentum through her pushing on me to have set up my own web domain, started doing development in video game design, and that was something that I had dreamed about doing ever since I was 6 years old and had never really found the faith in myself to do it. And because of events like this, meeting people and seeing other people who are doing the things that I could be doing gave me a realization that I wasn't doing enough with my life at that point. And ever since then, my life has been just amazingly transformed. So this means a lot to me. That's all I wanted to say. And now back to the identity theft. So I don't know if there's anybody who's a lawyer in the house or might know a lawyer, works with lawyers. If so, I do have potential interest in pursuing litigation about the incident that I'm going to talk about. So if you would like to meet with me, I'd be happy to talk to you and find out what I can do as far as options. When your identity gets stolen, one of the things that enters your mind when you're talking to businesses, banks, government, is what is the other person out there who's pretending they're me doing? They've already assumed your identity in some fashion and have done something that you've become aware of. And now you're wondering, well, how do I know I'm really me? Or more to the point, from the perspective of the institution that you're dealing with, how do they know that you're you? How do they differentiate between you and the person who's committed fraud in your name? The person obviously got away with the fraud once. What's to stop them from continuing to do so? So you start thinking about, well, how do I know that I'm me? How can I prove it to somebody else? Because, you call the bank up and they might ask you your mother's maiden name, they might ask you for your social security number, your last address, or what kind of car you drove in 1997. Those kind of things are public knowledge and can be found out by somebody who does enough research on you. They are often good enough to give reasonable assurance, but when you're in a paranoid situation where you know that there's somebody out there who's stealing your identity, that doesn't seem good enough anymore. So what else is there? Well, you have identifying documents. I have a state-issued driver's license. I have a social security card. I have a birth certificate. Sure, the birth certificate will convince anybody that I'm who I say I am. But I don't think any of those things are ironclad. They're not solid. Anybody can forge a document. Anybody can look at a document in public records and use the information contained therein to convince somebody else that they're you. So the best thing I could come up with is that I could get a whole bunch of people together who've known me for years, who would all stand up and say that I'm me. That might be the best authentication. It's a social layer identification. It doesn't require understanding of technology. It doesn't require documented proof, which could be forged or altered or spoofed. It's really hard to spoof a group of people. That might be the best idea that I've come up with so far. If anybody has a better idea, obviously it's not a very portable solution, but if you are in a situation where you're trying to prove that you're you against somebody else claiming that they're you, you can subpoena people, you can bring them to testify. It's not really practical on an everyday basis, but that's the ultimate form of authentication, I think. So am I me or am I an evil impersonator? I'm going to tell you that I'm me, but who knows? There could be other people here pretending to be me. So about the case study of what happened with me. Today's the 12th, is it? Tax deadline is April 15th, just a couple days from now. I hope everybody has filed their tax returns this year. If you haven't, who knows? Maybe somebody else may have. I've been using TurboTax for 10 years. Normally, I get my information, W-2s and whatnot, sent to me by the end of January, and I like to get my refund as soon as I can. So I get all that stuff together probably the first or second weekend in February. I just get it out of the way. I e-file, I get my return in a couple days, or I get my refund in a couple days, and everything's good, and I'm happy. I spend the money, and I live my life. This year was a little bit different. I had to wait a couple of months because I was pretty busy. I didn't have a free weekend when I could sit down and just spend 3 or 4 hours going through everything. So I didn't get into try to file until March, third week of March. I tried to file my 2013 return, and the e-file was a little bit different this year. Apparently, IRS has been trying to improve their e-file security, and so they instituted a PIN system where you have to go to irs.gov and generate a PIN after proving to irs.gov that you're who you claim to be. Once you have the PIN in hand, you can go back to TurboTax, enter the PIN there, and you also have to solve a CAPTCHA, and then you can e-file. So the first time I tried to solve the CAPTCHA, I failed, and it reloaded the page, and it looked like it didn't go through. So then I got a new CAPTCHA. I filled that one out, and I submitted, and then it came back and said that my filing was rejected. It said that the IRS had already received a return for my tax ID this year, and that I could not e-file. I thought for a minute that maybe the initial submit that I had just done moments before had actually gone through, and there was some glitch with the website, so I logged out, logged back in. TurboTax was still saying that I hadn't submitted yet, and I was ready to. So I tried again, and it was rejected again. So then I called up TurboTax support and had a conversation with them. They confirmed that somebody had filed a return using my information just 6 days previously. At that point, I was baffled because it looked. I was under the assumption that my TurboTax account had been hacked. There were no traces of it visible as a user. I didn't see a history of a tax return having been filed for this year. Normally, when you submit your tax return after you visit TurboTax again, it gives you the status of your filing. This says, the government has received it, they're approving it, or whatever the status happens to be. There was nothing like that. I started going through my account information and looking to see if there was an additional email address added to my account, because the TurboTax people said that apparently whoever had done this had a different email address. They didn't give me the exact email address, but they said it was a domain that I don't use. I looked there and there was nothing. So I thought, well, this person's really good at covering their tracks. I was also baffled because I had not received any notification that anyone had accessed my account, changed password, added an email address, filed anything. I was getting no notifications through my emails that TurboTax has on file to contact me at, and yet somebody had managed to get into my account and submitted a return. So how did they do that? It turns out that my account was never compromised. TurboTax allows new accounts to be created, duplicating existing accounts' personal identification. They don't even regard this as suspicious activity. I asked them about this, and they explained that because people only use TurboTax once a year on average, many times they can't remember their old password, and rather than, although TurboTax does have a forgot your username, forgot your password reset feature, a lot of people don't do that. They just create a brand new account each and every year, which is pretty stupid. Also, they gave me the excuse that when people get married, they often will try to file jointly versus as an individual, and in order to have two different returns in process in the preparation stages, you have to have multiple accounts. So that actually sounds like a fairly legitimate use case. People change their names, they might change their identities, and might want to have a joint account that both the husband and the wife can access, and so on and so forth. But my stance on this is that you have to notify the person of the original account. If you have given somebody an account on your system and you have identified them, especially in something that's legal and financial like this, I believe that you have an obligation to notify that individual at the contact information on record at their account if somebody else tries to open up a new account in their name. TurboTax never did this. Currently, as far as I know, this vulnerability is still out there. It's not even a technical vulnerability. I advocated when I spoke with TurboTax that this was an issue that they would need to fix very urgently, and I don't know the status currently, but at least this year I've been hearing, since I've been talking to people about this, that this type of e-filing fraud is markedly up from previous years. I don't have numbers, but that's what I've heard from my employer's HR, from friends who have heard about similar incidents with other people, from the police when I talked with them. The only real defense at this point is that you file first. So when you e-file, the first e-file gets accepted. Once an e-file has been accepted for that year, the IRS will reject any subsequent attempts to e-file. So get your return in as early as possible. That's the only way you can protect yourself. Even if TurboTax had notified me, it wouldn't have stopped the attacker from using another tax preparation service. IRS needs to address the issue at their root. They need to do better with authenticating. Their attempt at having a submission pin each year was a good thought, but it was poorly implemented. I'll show why in a moment. Actually, right now. This is the screenshot of what the IRS's website looks like when you get your e-file pin. You have to determine your eligibility, so you have some criteria that you have to have met. Your return for previous year had to have been processed by November 23rd. I guess at that date they reset the PIN for the next year or something like that. You have to gather information to prove that you're you, which is your social security number or tax identification number, your first and last name. Who knows that? Your date of birth, a lot of people know that. Your filing status. I'm not even sure what that means, but I was able to figure it out when I went to the site just by guessing. Maybe it had instructions, I don't really remember, but it was not a hard thing to guess my filing status correctly and get my PIN. And you have to have a complete mailing address as it appeared on your 2012 tax return, which again is pretty much public knowledge. So this sort of stuff is what they are considering identifying information to authenticate that you are you, and it's not enough. Anybody can get this information pretty easily. I mean, social security number is supposed to be private, but it's not. Your employers know it, your banks know it, your creditors know it. It's probably out there, and it's very easy to obtain it if you're looking for it. But once you have all that information, the IRS will give you a PIN number that, as far as the IRS is concerned, is your key to your e-file. So you get your e-file ready to go, you put in the PIN, and they trust it. They think that that means that you're you, and it doesn't. So 2 days later, after I had talked with the TurboTax support, I got my refund in the mail. I didn't recognize it at first. What I received was actually a prepaid Visa card from some bank that I had never heard of. I contacted the bank. I was like, "What is this?" And they said, "Oh, this is your account that you requested, and there's a balance in there. Would you like to know the balance?" Sure. They told me what the balance was. I said, "Well, what was the source of the deposit for this balance?" And they said, "Oh, TurboTax. That's your tax return for this year." I'm like, "Oh, okay." So somebody stole my ID. They filed a fraudulent tax return in my name in order to steal the refund, which was a 4-digit figure, and they sent it to my address. Which, maybe that was stupidity on their part. Maybe they couldn't figure out how to change the address on record to something that would not be traceable to them. Maybe they were local. I don't know. But I have the money, and I have to return it to the federal government, and I have to file my real return and get my real refund. So that's basically the story. If this happens to you, you're going to either find out first or the IRS is going to find out first. Well, they'll really find out second because the person who knows first is the person who did it. But if you find out first, which was the case in my situation, you get to initiate the contact. TurboTax gave me instructions on to go to the IRS's website, get more information on what to do. I'll talk about that in more detail, but there's a URL here. If you go to that, that gives you a guide as to what to do when this happens. You can also call this phone number. If the IRS finds out, which would be the case typically if you've filed by mail, if you physically mail your return in and they receive a second physical copy, that will flag something in their system, and they will contact you. You'll get a letter in the mail, days, weeks, months, maybe later, saying that there's something fishy going on. We received 2 returns this year from you. Help us out. And then you get to respond to that. So if they contact you, they will provide you with the contact information of somebody who's working on your case already, who's been assigned to it. So rather than this general 800 number, use the contact information that they give you in the letter that you'll receive. So this is what you have to do. You still have to file your real return, obviously. There is a IRS form 14039, which is an identity theft affidavit. You have to go to your local police and file a police report about the incident. And then you have to send all this information, the tax return, your W-2s, your 14039, the police report, and a photocopy of your Social Security card, plus some valid form of government ID, like a driver's license, passport, military ID, or whatever. And mail that all to them, and then you wait. They told me that it could take anywhere from 90 to 211 days. I don't know what 211 comes from, but it was an oddly precise number. This is 14039. You'll notice here, this is kind of funny. Down at the bottom in the red oval, they're only looking for the last 4 digits of your taxpayer's Social Security number or taxpayer's complete individual taxpayer identification number. So they don't even trust themselves with the number that's already been stolen. I'm not really sure what threat this is mitigating, but that's the government for you. So when you're filing the police report, there's a lot of things that you need to do. Basically, you can just go down to the police and say, I was a victim of identity theft, my tax ID has been stolen, whatever, and they'll be like, okay, yeah, here's a form to fill out. But you want to fill that form out as completely as possible. It's very unlikely that your local police are going to have anything to do with this case, and they're going to kind of be like, well, what do you want us to do? They don't have the resources or the expertise to deal with identity theft in most cases. But the IRS still requires this, and after you tell them that, they're like, oh, okay, so then we'll take a report, we'll file it, and that'll probably pretty much be the end of it unless somebody requests it. The IRS will follow up, possibly the Social Security Administration, whoever's investigating it, may request that report, and you're going to send it to them anyway. I did get some information from my local police saying that depending state by state, some states are more cooperative working with the federal government than others, and for Ohio, they said that Ohio isn't there yet, but gradually the states are starting to improve their cooperation. So if you are a victim at the state filing level as well as the federal level, depending what state you live in, you might get closer or weaker cooperation between the feds and the state. It just depends on case by case what state you live in. So when you file the police report, you want to give them as much information as possible, dates and times, obviously. Start keeping meticulous notes immediately as soon as you realize that something's up. Get names of anybody you talk to. Sometimes customer service people won't give you a name, or they'll give you a fake name, or they'll give you a first name. If they have an employee ID number or something like that that you can put down, or a case tracking number. Most well-run financial institutions have case numbers for any time somebody calls, and you can reference that. It will help if the police follow up with the institution to get the information from their end as well, because the institution that you deal with is not going to trust you. There will be confidentiality. Even if you're the real person whose identity was stolen, they don't necessarily know that. And so they're going to be very careful and only give you information pertaining to your account. In my case, TurboTax was very willing to give me information about the account that I had control over, that I had created. I could prove to them that I had the email address of record and information that was in there. I could relate that over the phone to them, and they were like, yep, that's you. For the other account that had been created by the person who committed fraud, they asked me if I could identify myself. Obviously, I couldn't. I didn't know the email address that the fraud committer had used. And because of that, they were like, well, for confidentiality reasons, we can't give you this information. They were willing to give it if I had a subpoena or to police, and possibly the police or the IRS could get that information and send it to me. I obviously have a lot of interest in finding out exactly what the person who committed this crime used. So if they have additional information, it would be very helpful for me to know that in order to safeguard myself. If they were working through my employer, that might give a lead to possibly there was a leak in a previous employer, either internally with the company, or maybe somebody hacked into them and got the information. Who knows? But without having legal authority to subpoena the information myself, I can't get it. I'd love to track down every lead myself, because I don't have faith that the law enforcement has the resources or the concern, because there's, they have to protect everybody. But I can certainly follow up on things in my spare time, and I probably have fun doing it. But I really can't unless I get some cooperation. It's a good idea if you have to call somebody on the phone. You're not going to have the time to write down everything that they're telling you. You can be very slow and ask them to repeat themselves and take notes. I encourage you to do that. It's even better if you can record the call. Smartphones, there are phone call recording apps that you can get for iOS or Android, which make it very easy. But you do have to be mindful of the law. There's wiretapping laws that say you can't record a conversation without consent. So notify the person that you're talking to and let them know that the call may be recorded for quality purposes. They probably tell you that when you're on hold anyway. I don't know if that covers it. If the party on the other end tells you that they may be recording you, does that mean that they consent to you recording them? I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know. But definitely let them know that you're recording them, and that will help if you need to go back and get a transcript and verify exactly what they say versus what you claim or wrote down, which may not be completely accurate what they said. Also, a lot of times when you're on the phone, the call quality is horrible. They're usually in a call center long distance somewhere, maybe in another country, and just the audio quality of the call can be very frustrating to hear what they're saying clearly. And if they are a call center in another country, they may not be speaking their native language. They may be using odd speech patterns or accent that would be even harder to understand. And so it's worth it if you can record the call, just because it helps you get through the call faster. But make sure you understand what they're saying when they say things to you. Don't just say, okay, yeah, and think, well, I can go back and listen to the recording and get it. Because if you say, okay, yeah, that might be that you're agreeing to something. And if you're not completely clear on what they've said and that you can understand it, don't agree to things. You might be indemnifying them or something, who knows, or authorizing them to do some action on your behalf. You want to make sure you understand what they're doing. If possible, you can use web chat. A lot of customer service systems are set up so that you can go to the website and initiate a live chat. You have to be careful with live chat because some of them will tell you you're not allowed to use personally identifying information, like sensitive information like your social security card or number or your account information and so forth. Some of them will actually filter numbers so that you can't type numbers or email addresses and so forth. But you can get them to send you a transcript at the end, which is really nice because you don't have to. But be careful with that because sometimes that feature doesn't work for whatever reason. The email never gets sent. And so I always recommend select all, copy, paste, and dump it into Notepad or something so that you have it even after you close the window. Don't rely on the email to get to you. So what happens next? The IRS is going to manually review my return when they receive it, and they'll start an investigation. Like I said, it takes anywhere from 90 to 211 days. They will always manually review my return every year from now on until I die. Yay. I can't e-file this year, but in future years I will be able to again, but they will still pull it aside and manually review it every year, which will slow down future refunds and possibly might make me more vulnerable to audit just because they're looking more closely. I always try to file as honestly as I know. Sometimes the laws are confusing and you always worry that you're getting something wrong. It's just something I have to live with. And I was not the criminal in this case, but I feel like I'm getting treated with extra scrutiny as though I'm a suspect. As I found out in this case, the fraud committed against me was only at the federal level, but I did follow up with state and local tax authorities as well, which you should do, obviously. Communicate that your identity has been stolen. That will alert them. I don't know that it really makes them do anything, but they can at least tell you if any actions that might have been suspicious were initiated. They'll have records of dates and times that things happened, if anything did happen, and they can ask you, was this you or was this your spouse or somebody duly designated as a legal power of attorney or whatever, or your accountant, and you can say yes or no, I recognize that, or I don't, and then they can take further action from there. You should probably also notify your current and former employers of this. It may not be of interest to your former employers, but I think it's always good to let people know if they might be victimized further, or who knows, your former employer might have been compromised, never notified you, but they're hearing from everybody now, and they can say, oh yeah, we got breached, and that's a pretty good lead to pass on to investigators if they can find that out. So definitely follow up with them and see if they can tell you anything. Obviously, you want to notify any financial institutions that you do business with, that your identity has been stolen. You can notify the credit bureaus. You can put a fraud alert out, or even better than a fraud alert was a credit freeze. So a fraud alert notifies the credit bureaus that fraud has been committed or is suspected to have been committed, so that in the future, anybody requesting your credit report to clear you for a loan or a credit card can see what your credit is. It will require that they get authorization, which I'm not really sure what the authorization consists of. Yeah, basically they'll get back in touch with you and confirm that they're talking to you and that you really wanted to apply for a credit card or a loan, and you'll say yes. Or you can preemptively notify them of that you're intending to do so, and then they'll go ahead and release the credit report. The credit freeze is basically a permanent freeze. They will not allow the credit to be the credit report to be released under any circumstances unless you release the freeze. And again, I wonder how the credit bureaus know that they're dealing with you and not the imposter. But you can either release a freeze temporarily or permanently. Permanently means you probably killed the guy who did it and you're not worried about them coming back anymore. Temporary would be that, well, you just want to apply for a loan for whatever reason and you need to use the credit report, but you're still worried that your identity's been stolen and could be used again, so you want to refreeze it as soon as you're done with the ad hoc credit check that you're doing today. Obviously, this makes your life a lot more complicated. It really slows things down. If you do need to apply for a loan, you can't get instant pre-approval anymore, and so on, and it kind of sucks. A question I had was, should I get a new Social Security number? The IRS and Social Security Administration can issue a new number, but they will only do so if they have proof that your identity has been stolen and that Social Security number has been compromised. They won't do it if you've simply lost your wallet or your Social Security card and you suspect that your number may have been released or that there's been a breach, but there hasn't been an actual incident yet. Even if you do get a new Social Security number, it doesn't really fix anything because people still know you by the old number. That old number can be used, and it will still trace back to you. So it doesn't really help as much as you might think it would. Really, the IRS really needs to fix their security model. And they're not the only ones, but geez. It is really bad the way that they are doing things currently. There's some additional information, like a lot more detail than what I've just glossed over is available in IRS Publication 4535, Social Security Administration Publication EN-05-10064. Basically outlines what to do if you suspect or know that you've been a victim of identity theft. So there's a lot of things that could still happen to me now. I outlined already that the IRS will be on guard forever. My credit hasn't been damaged to my knowledge yet, but it could be ruined. Somebody could get a job, give the employer my Social Security number. The employer reports the earnings of that person to the IRS as earnings that I earned, which I have no knowledge of. When I submit my tax return, the IRS says, well, hold on, you also did work for this other company, didn't you? And then I have to prove that I didn't. Again, I'm not the victim, or I am the victim, but I feel like I'm being treated like the criminal in that case. Somebody could steal your identity and use that to secure property, accounts, other liabilities that you have no knowledge about until somebody comes collecting on a bill, or sues you for, who knows what. Maybe you were neglectful in owning some property that caused damage to somebody else, and they're going to find out who owned that property and sue, and then they trace it back to you, but it really wasn't you. People could commit crimes in your name, and the people investigating crime come to you, and you have to prove that you didn't do it. It sucks. Basically, your identity could be a commodity for sale to other people, too. It's not just the one person who stole it. They might take that information and sell it to other criminals, and you could have multiple people using your identity. You have to deal with all these things. You don't know about it until you hear about it, but they're still attributed to you. So to protect yourself, the IRS recommends that you not give your Social Security number out to anybody. That should be common knowledge, very obvious, but it's a bad security model because basically, for all intents and purposes, the IRS kind of treats the Social Security number as an identifier, but also kind of as a password. Not so much the case now that they're using this PIN system, but for decades, they kind of treated that as like a secret that only you know. And if you give them that number, they believe that the person giving the number is you. Well, it's not a secret. Your employer knows it. Your banks know it. Really, the only defense at this point is to file your return as soon as possible to avoid somebody else beating you to the punch. You can also do things with the credit bureaus. Experian, TransUnion, Equifax are the three big ones. I don't know of any others, but they always say these are the big three, and I don't know if that means that those are the only three, or why are there only three and not four, or could I start up my own credit bureau and add a fourth one? But these are the three you need to talk to. You really only need to talk to one because they do talk to each other, But if you want to speed that process along, you can talk to all three of them, and it's probably a good idea. You can issue a fraud alert or freeze your credit report. I talked about that already. Your banks, creditors, and financial institutions, you want to set up some kind of theft protection with those. I think it's kind of bogus that you have to pay a service like $20 a month for identity theft insurance or whatever. Why aren't they making these protections mandatory and part of the cost of doing business as a bank? Why are they passing that on to people who feel paranoid enough that they need it? I think it's high time that everybody get the benefit. There's been enough breaches now with the Target breach this past Christmas season, 45 million credit card numbers released. It happens every day, and you hear about it more and more, and they need to stop using identity theft protection services as a Band-Aid product that they can sell you and start adopting better practices. To that end, you can, with the institutions that you do business with that know you, you can give them additional authentication. So when you're dealing with them face-to-face or on the phone, oftentimes you can call and be like, hey, I'm so-and-so. And they're like, what's your mother's maiden name? And you'll be like, blah, blah, blah. And they'll be like, okay, cool, we're sure you're you. What do you want to do today? And that's not really enough because your mom probably, her name is public knowledge. You can come up with a password, not your web account password, but a verbal password that they can have on file, and they'll ask you for it. And if they do and you can't give it to them, they won't do business with you. Without this, you can call and be like, my contact information is changing. I'm moving. This is my new address. This is my new phone number. As soon as they change that information on file, you no longer have a connection to them at your real address and phone number. And so then that frees up whoever's attacking you to do further things with your account, and they'll send a notifications about your account's been closed or transfer's been sent to this other account or whatever to the attacker's contact information, and you'll never hear about it. So if you don't look at your 401k for 3 years and you log in and suddenly it's like, oh, I thought I had a 401k. It has a zero balance and the account's been closed. And then you find out that somebody did that and they thought it was you, but it wasn't, and now it's too late to do anything. Well, have the account password so that when somebody calls claiming to be you, they can't get any further than that. If your ID does get stolen, you're probably not going to think that it could happen to you, but it can. It's a little bit shocking at first, and then you just worry. These links here all go to different documents or web pages with resources. The IRS, the FTC, Social Security, they all have resources with advice for you. The advice currently isn't the best. Dealing with institutions is very frustrating because you're just another person, another number to them. You're not really their top priority. They don't care about you like you would like to be cared about. It doesn't feel like you're talking to a person when you're talking to somebody from these places. They kind of read from a script, and they process you as though you're just another product on an assembly line going through a process, and it doesn't give you much reassurance. I wish I could say better than that, but that's the reality. I mean, it happens to thousands of people every year, and you're just one of many in a crowd. So they should really fix the system, right? These are the people to complain to primarily. I do have some suggestions or ideas for suggestions. I have not necessarily thought these through completely, so they may not be the best ideas, but I think that something needs to be done. They need to recognize, first of all, that the Social Security number is not an authenticator. Anybody could have that information. People legitimately can have that information, or somebody can steal it and use it against you. It's not a secret. 3 can keep a secret if 2 are dead, and you're not going to get your boss and the government to die. So that's not a really good model. What can we do instead? If we do a full reset on the Social Security number system, We could issue everybody a new number, and that will protect people who may not know that their identity has been stolen. They should probably reserve the use of the Social Security number for exclusive use of the Social Security Administration and not use it for any other purpose. That was the original bargain when the SSA was instituted, and there's been a lot of creep over the years because there is no real federal ID system in place. That was resisted as politically it was not desired at the time. People didn't want the federal government to have that much power to track people, but obviously the government does have a need, a legitimate need to identify you and to know who you're dealing with when you're dealing with them. And if they don't have some kind of identity form, they're going to use what is the closest thing to that, which in history has been the Social Security number. Maybe there should be a separate tax ID for IRS purposes. Maybe there should be a separate government ID just to separate the concerns a little bit. It'll probably confuse people and complicate things more, but it's an idea. I think that when you go to start a new job, when you begin employment with a new employer, they should issue a specific unique tax ID for you for that employer, rather than using the same number across multiple employers. Have a prefix that's the employer number, maybe something that tracks back to you, and hash them together somehow, and generate a unique number for that employer only. That way, if somebody stealing your Social Security number tries to use that number to file a fraudulent return citing a different employer, that will trigger a red flag. It will obviously not be the correct number, and it will stop the fraud at that point. They could even do this each year, so that you have a unique number each year, and that number gets refreshed and reissued to you. So you can only do a one-time filing with that number, and it's a unique keyed number for you and that employer. And if you have multiple employers, you have multiple numbers. They could do a lot of things like that. I think it would make it a lot harder. It would be better security than what they have in place with the PIN system that they're currently moving to. I just talked about all that stuff. That's pretty much all I have at this point as far as ideas on how to fix things. I hope you got something out of it, and thank you for listening. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them.
Just some commentary or feedback on call recording. So it's state by state, and it's really tough because if you're not in the same state with the other person or they're overseas, what I'll do is I'll go on the side of the state I'm in. But if you're nervous about it, don't expect to use it in court. But if it requires two-party, you're not going to get to use it in court if you're recording. I'm not saying don't, because people don't know won't hurt them, but you won't be able to use it in court. If it's single-party consent, you do not need to tell them you're recording. And that's a useful thing to know. Maryland can have two-party. Every state's a little bit different. Also, in terms of, I've had identity theft too, and it really sucks, sir. I hear your pain. It sounds like you're really suffering. You're so pissed, at least. Most homeowners insurance will have some coverage built into your arrangement with them, so you can go ahead and contact them and get some help. When I had my identity theft stolen, it wasn't taxes, it was other stuff. But it was so much running around. You know, it's like deal with the cops, and then go to the bank, and then go over here and talk to this person. And the services your homeowners typically involves just helping you deal with the running around stuff, which can help reduce the stress. So, okay, that's my commentary.
Thank you. Yeah.
What's the purpose of filing a tax return for somebody else? How does that fraud, unless they're able to get to your house and steal your mail to get to that prepaid credit card, what do they gain?
Right, so I'll repeat the question for the benefit of the recording. The question was, what's the benefit of filing a fraudulent return if the money goes to your address? I don't know. I thought that was a pretty stupid move on the part of the person who did it. Exactly. If they were a neighbor, somebody in the neighborhood locally who could intercept the mail, that is a possibility. It could be that they just screwed up in this case and they really meant to divert the refund to an address that they had control over and could receive it at. Maybe they started to try to do that, but they realized that that's harder because they have to have control over some place, and maybe there's cameras in the area, maybe people know who lives there. I really can't speculate. But obviously the motive in the tax filing fraud is to get the refund check and to cash it. And that requires a bit of identity theft and a bit of logistics to actually get the funds diverted. It could even be that they didn't care about the credit card itself. They might have just waited a couple days, called the bank that issued the card, said, hey, I didn't get my card, could you send it to this address? And maybe then they would have gotten it, or maybe they could have activated the card over the phone, or maybe just logged into the account without needing the prepaid card and did a transfer out of that account to another account, and then to do money laundering until they eventually get to a place where the government can't see into, and then they have it. But
or it's just epic trolling.
So, I'm sorry, say again?
It could be epic trolling.
Epic trolling, yeah, I guess so. Yes?
Maybe they just wanted that extra percentage of the Amazon account that TurboTax offers.
Yeah, that's a good point.
That wasn't my question.
Okay.
My question was, how did they do? Did they do a good job on your tax? I mean, you redid them. Did you get to the same figure they did, or was it?
I have no idea. I don't have access to the actual return yet. I'm hoping that I will be able to get it at some point, but TurboTax would not release it to me, citing confidentiality.
But the bank told you the balance of the card was, though, right?
Sorry?
The bank told you the balance of the card, right?
Yes, when I contacted the bank, I didn't tell them immediately that I was a victim of this fraud. I didn't know what if it had anything to do with that or not, so I wasn't going to tell them more than they needed to know. When I talked to them, initially I initiated contact through their website. They had a form I submitted. I just said, I received this card in the mail. I don't recall requesting it. I've never heard of you before. I don't do business with you customarily. Could you please explain why this was sent? They replied saying that, please call us at this number. And I had a conversation with them and gave them the account number that was on the credit card. They matched it up and verified that I was who I said I was, my name, my address, and whatever. And then they would, well, the balance on this card is whatever it was. And I was like, okay, well, that's very interesting. I don't know where that could have come from. Can you tell me the source? And they told me the source because they believed that I was the account holder. Why not tell me?
So your refund would be bigger or smaller than that number, so I was just curious.
Yeah, in actual practice this year, my refund should have been larger, but it was a pretty sizable amount that they would have gotten had they gotten the funds diverted to them. I was fortunate enough that I happened to file my taxes like the mailing day before the refund arrived. So if that hadn't happened, I might have just looked at that as junk mail and thought it was a pre-approved Visa card and thrown it out. Because I was suspicious of everything and I looked at it more closely, I was able to catch it before they could have done anything.
And that's when they would have called the bank and got it resent to the other address.
Yeah, so I was just very fortunate with the timing of it that I was able to respond. If I hadn't done my taxes that weekend and put it off another week, I might have been too late.
Now, I just did my TurboTax in the movie. I can't remember. Is a prepaid Visa card one of the options?
Yes, the question was, if you're using TurboTax as prepaid credit, one of the options. They have several options. You can do a prepaid credit card. You can do a direct deposit to your bank account, or you can get an Amazon gift card. If you use the Amazon gift card option, they give you an additional 10% value on the refund, but obviously you can only spend the money at Amazon, so that's not necessarily the best thing, but 10% could be a lot of money. In this actual case, they did a direct deposit to a different bank that also issues prepaid Visa cards. So it wasn't the TurboTax's bank that TurboTax uses for prepaid Visa returns, refunds rather. It was a different bank entirely that also issues prepaid visas. Yeah. So from TurboTax's standpoint, it was a direct deposit into a bank account. That bank issued a Visa to with the amount of the deposit as the balance, and then that was mailed to my address. And the person who committed the fraud had my address on record with TurboTax on the return that they filed to the IRS and with the bank. So when the bank issued the prepaid Visa to me, it went to my address. It probably made things less suspicious that the addresses were consistent, and maybe that's why they did it. Yeah, it was pretty lucky that the timing worked out, that I caught onto it just before the money became available. Yes?
Did you say that you discovered where the breach actually took place, where they got your information from?
We don't know at this time. The question was, do we know where the breach occurred, how the fraud committer had acquired the Social Security number and other info, but I don't know. I have no idea. Yes?
You had mentioned that identity theft protection, you suggest the use of it at this point. How do you feel about some of these large companies spending 3 hours of your time on television illustrating to you just how badly you can kind of get screwed, while basically also trying to teach everybody a lesson by telling them that they can't use technology. And I mean, it seems to be that your illustration about the system itself being fundamentally flawed has actually nothing to do with what we as individuals actually do with our own information and how easily it can be stolen.
Yeah, I'm trying to summarize that into a concise question. Basically,
how do you personally feel about these services?
the identity theft protection services? Okay, so the question was, given that my position is that the system is flawed and it's too easy to commit ID theft, what is my opinion of the theft protection services that are offered? And you said something else about ordinary people being paranoid about using technology. I wasn't really clear how that related.
Yeah, some of the identity theft monitoring companies illustrating that you have to hunt down in the basements and never use a cell phone.
Yeah, there's a lot of paranoia about identity theft. Once it happens to you, you become a lot more aware of it and paranoid than you ever would be if you had just heard about it. Everybody kind of lives in a little bubble where they think that they're protected and that nothing bad's going to happen to them. And for the most part, nothing bad does happen to the majority of people. But this type of thing happens all the time to a lot of people, and it's too easy currently for people to get away with it. My opinion about the theft protection services are, again, I think that they need to institute these protections as a standard rather than for people who need it. There might be logistical or not enough supply to cover everybody type reasons why they don't do that. But at the same time, if they're not going to apply these protection measures, they need to do something stronger on the front end about authenticating that you're a real person. Right now, it's really easy for me to go to a website, enter some information, and generate a new account. And that institution only has that exposure of that web session to know that I'm me. And is that really strong enough as an authenticator? What can you do instead? There's got to be a balance, and I don't know where the balance is. It's a very difficult problem to solve. But currently, it's just too easy to take somebody else's information and use it to impersonate somebody else. I don't know if that's a good enough answer. Anybody else? All right, well, thank you. I hope that you've enjoyed Notacon so much this year. There's still a lot of things left to do tonight. This was, I guess, the last talk at Notacon, and may be the last talk ever at Notacon. This may be the last time we're all in the same room together. And like I said at the very beginning of the talk, I got a lot out of my social interactions with people. Take advantage of that. Really, you might not see these people again, and who knows what interesting things might happen if you talk to them. So please do. And if we do have another Notacon next year, bring somebody to sit in the seat next to you. Pay for their ticket. We need to grow. The most people that have ever been at a Notacon event was 300, and that was like 6 years ago. I think it's like something around 80 this year. And if we could all just bring one other person and pay for their ticket and get them infected with the bug, maybe get some more people interested in talking, we could conceivably pull this out and rescue it. If not, I think other people will probably pick up the torch. Maybe not next year, but in time something else will come up. But do your part to make the scene strong. Thank you.